When starting my new job at the engineering company, I, Jake Turner, was full of expectations and excitement. The opportunity to work at one of the largest companies in the sector was a dream come true. My first day was filled with presentations and training, but something bothered me from the start: my boss, Mr. Thompson. Shortly after the initial presentation, he called me into his office. "Jake, right? I'm Mr. Thompson, your boss. I heard you came from Texas," he said, a sarcastic smile on his face. Confirming, I responded with a simple "Yes, sir." "Interesting," he continued. "I hope you can keep up here. We're not in the middle of nowhere, you know that, right?" His tone was condescending, and I felt a chill run down my spine. "Of course, sir," I said, trying to sound confident. The following days were increasingly difficult. During staff meetings, Mr. Thompson made a point of highlighting my Texas accent in a derogatory manner. "Jake, why don't you tell us more about this project? But please try to speak in a way that we can all understand," he said, making his colleagues laugh. With each comment, my confidence was eroded. I was always proud of my roots, but there, in that hostile environment, I started to doubt myself. In one meeting, Mr. Thompson abruptly interrupted me. "Jake, let's skip this part. It sounds like your accent is making it difficult for everyone to understand you." I could see the embarrassment on my colleagues' faces, but no one dared to contradict the boss. On another occasion, while we were reviewing reports on an important project, he made a point of ridiculing me. "Jake, are those numbers correct? Because last time I checked, in Texas things were a little different," he said, laughing. "Yes, sir. I checked the numbers several times," I replied, trying to maintain my composure. One time, during lunch in the break room, I overheard Mr. Thompson talking to other managers. "This Jake, he thinks he can come from Texas and teach us how to do engineering. He can barely form a sentence without that drawl," he would say, not caring that I could hear. The humiliation was constant, and I began to question whether I really belonged there. My productivity dropped, and the weight of constant criticism began to affect my work. I felt isolated, unable to find an ally. Every day was a battle to keep my head up and not let Mr. Thompson destroy my self-confidence completely. During a conversation with my wife, Maria, one night at home, I vented about the situation. "Maria, I don't know what to do anymore. Mr. Thompson humiliates me every day because of my accent. I'm at my limit," I confessed, my voice breaking. Maria, always supportive, hugged me and said, "Jake, you're talented and you've worked hard to get here. Don't let him get you down. You need to find a way to show your worth." These words gave me the strength to continue, but I knew I needed to do something more concrete. I decided I wasn't going to let myself be a silent victim. I needed to find a way to combat the bullying and show Mr. Thompson, and everyone else, that I was more than just a Texas accent. It was on a particularly exhausting late afternoon that I decided I needed to do something about the daily bullying I faced from Mr. Thompson. My Texas accent seemed to be reason enough for him to constantly ridicule me, but I knew there was something deeper in his attitude, perhaps a fear of being outdone, perhaps pure and simple prejudice. It was time to find allies and make a plan. After work, I decided to stay at the office a little longer, reviewing some reports. It was then that Ethan, a data analyst with whom I had exchanged a few words, entered the room. "Jake, you always seem to be working late. How are you?" he asked, with an expression of curiosity and concern. "Ah, Ethan, just trying to understand some data here," I replied, hesitating a bit before continuing. "Actually, I'm tired of the way Mr. Thompson treats me, and I'm thinking about doing something about it." Ethan frowned, visibly interested. "You're not the only one who feels this way. Many of us are unhappy with the way he manages the team. If you need help, you can count on me." That was the first step. It wasn't long before Samantha, a software engineer with an analytical eye and a brilliant mind, joined us. I found her in the coffee room while she was reviewing some code on her laptop. "Samantha, can I ask you a question?" I began, trying to gauge her reaction. "Have you ever felt wronged by Mr. Thompson?" She looked up from her laptop, a gleam of curiosity in her gaze. "Jake, is that a rhetorical question?" "Of course it is. He's a tyrant." "But why are you asking that?" I explained to her my idea of investigating errors and possible fraud in projects led by Thompson. She listened intently, and when I finished, a determined smile appeared on her face. "Count me in. If he's making mistakes or something more serious, we'll find out and expose everything." Our small clandestine team started working after hours. We each had a clear role. Ethan reviewed the data and financial reports, Samantha reviewed the codes and systems, and I did a little bit of everything, trying to coordinate our efforts and make sure we left no stone unturned. On one of those busy work nights, we were all gathered in the conference room, surrounded by stacks of papers and monitors glowing with graphs and data. Ethan broke the silence. "Jake, look at this. I found discrepancies in several financial reports. It appears that Mr. Thompson has been manipulating the numbers to hide flaws and embezzle funds." Samantha leaned over the table, examining the documents Ethan held out. "This is serious. If we can get concrete evidence, we will have enough material to unmask him." I felt a wave of relief mixed with determination. We're on the right track. Let's keep going. These late-night sessions weren't just about work, they were moments of forming alliances and building trust. Ethan and Samantha became more than colleagues, they were friends and allies in the fight for justice. With each discovery, our determination grew. "Jake, do you think this will work?" Samantha asked one particularly tense night. "I believe so, Samantha," I replied, trying to inspire confidence. "We are doing this not just for ourselves, but for everyone who has ever been harmed by Mr. Thompson. Together, we are stronger." And so, we continue our journey, united by the desire for justice and the dream of a better work environment. Each day brought new discoveries and, with them, the hope that we could, in fact, change the company's culture forever. I never imagined that by joining Ethan and Samantha to investigate Mr. Thompson, we would end up discovering something so serious. It all started very simply, we just wanted to gather evidence of his mistakes to have a fair chance in the workplace. But when we searched through the archives and old reports, we found something much more serious. One night, the three of us were in the conference room after work. Ethan was reviewing a financial report on his laptop, while Samantha was checking some physical documents. "Jake, look at this," Ethan said, with a worried expression on his face. "These numbers don't add up. There is a discrepancy of thousands of dollars between what was reported and what was actually spent." "Let me see," I replied, approaching the screen. "This is serious. We need more proof before jumping to conclusions." Samantha, ever meticulous, suggested, "Let's compare these reports to financial records from the last few years. If there's a pattern, we could be dealing with something big." We spent the next few weeks immersed in spreadsheets and documents. The more we investigated, the more evidence we found that Mr. Thompson was involved in fraudulent activities. He was embezzling funds and manipulating reports to hide his failures and ensure that no one questioned his management. One night, we were exhausted, sitting around the conference table littered with scattered papers. I looked at Ethan and Samantha and said, "We can't let him keep this up. We need to do something." "What if he finds out what we're doing?" Samantha asked, visibly worried. "He might fire us. If we remain silent, we will be complicit," I replied. "We need to be strategic. Let's gather all the evidence and prepare a flawless presentation. That way, when the time is right, we can expose everything at once." Ethan agreed, "Jake's right. We need to make sure all our bases are covered. If we do this right, he won't be able to take us down." From then on, our work became even more intense. We spent nights and weekends together, checking every detail. We discovered that Mr. Thompson was using a complex scheme to divert funds intended for projects and instead funneled the money into personal accounts and unauthorized expenses. One night in particular, we had a great discovery. Samantha found an old email in which Mr. Thompson instructed a subordinate to change financial records. "That's the proof we needed," she exclaimed, holding the email with shaking hands. "With this, we can directly link him to fraud." "We're almost there," Ethan said, relieved. "Now we just need to organize everything clearly and irrefutably." I felt a mixture of relief and anxiety. I knew we were dealing with something very serious, but I also knew we couldn't back down. "We're doing the right thing," I said, trying to reassure my friends and myself. "When all this comes to light, the company will have a chance to rid itself of a corrupt boss and make things better for all of us." With all the evidence in hand, we began preparing the presentation that would change everything. It was meticulous work. Every graph, every table, every document had to be perfect. We knew we couldn't make mistakes. The feeling of being about to expose something so big was overwhelming, but it also gave a sense of purpose. We were about to face a giant, but we were not alone. We had each other and, more importantly, we had the truth on our side. And so, with nerves of steel and unwavering determination, we continued our work, certain that justice would soon be served. The situation seemed untenable. Each day that passed, I felt the weight of Mr. Thompson's humiliation and bullying piling onto my shoulders. It was then that, in an act of desperation, I decided to seek advice from someone who had faced these problems before. And that's when Mrs. Williams entered the story. I had heard of her, of course. A true legend in the company, Mrs. Williams had been the head of the department before retiring. She was known for her technical competence and her spirit of justice, but also for her memorable clashes with Mr. Thompson. I decided that if anyone could help me, it was her. One late afternoon, after work, I went to her house. I rang the doorbell, feeling a mixture of nervousness and hope. The door opened and she appeared, with her gray hair and a knowing look that seemed to read my soul. "Jake Turner, right? Come in, I've been waiting for you." I was surprised. "How did you know I was coming?" She smiled, a tired but welcoming smile. "Nothing happens in this company without me knowing. Sit down, let's talk." We talked for hours. I told her about the bullying, about the group we formed and the frauds we discovered. She listened carefully, without interrupting, just nodding occasionally. When I finished, she was silent for a moment, pondering. "Jake, you're doing the right thing. But you need to be smart. Thompson is a dangerous man, and you're going to need more than proof to take him down." "But what else can I do, Mrs. Williams?" I asked, feeling the frustration growing. "We have the evidence, the data, what else is missing?" She leaned forward, her eyes fixed on mine. "You lack strategy, my friend. You need to understand the power dynamics in the company. Know your allies and enemies. And, most importantly, you need to know how to present your findings in a way that no one can ignore." This is how my secret mentorship with Mrs. Williams began. She taught me everything about the company's internal politics. Who were Mr. Thompson's allies, who could be persuaded to support our cause, and how to present the information in an impactful way. "Jake, you have to understand that it's not enough to be right. You have to make people believe you're right. And that takes skill." She also helped me perfect the presentation. "Use clear graphs, Jake. Show the numbers in a way that anyone can understand. And, above all, stay calm. No matter how much Thompson teases you, you need to be the picture of composure." Our meetings became a weekly ritual. Each encounter left me more prepared and confident. And each week, I saw the path ahead more clearly. Mrs. Williams was not just a mentor, she became an essential ally in my fight against injustice. "There will be a time when you will have to confront Mr. Thompson directly," she warned me one night. "When that happens, remember everything you've learned. He will try to destabilize you, but you are stronger than he thinks." Finally, the day of the big presentation arrived. Mrs. Williams was there, sitting in the back row, disguised as an ordinary visitor. When our eyes met, she gave me a slight nod, and I knew I was ready. Mrs. Williams' mentorship not only prepared me technically, but also gave me the courage to face Mr. Thompson as an equal. And in the end, it was his wisdom and experience that made all the difference. She showed me that even against seemingly insurmountable odds, justice always finds a way to prevail. From the first day I joined the company, I realized it wouldn't be easy. Mr. Thompson, with his arrogant and prejudiced way, never missed an opportunity to humiliate me. But, in the midst of this toxic environment, I found a light: Maria. Maria is a talented civil engineer with a Latin accent that made her as much a target for discrimination as my Texas accent. Our trajectories crossed in an unexpected way. I remember the day we were in the company cafeteria, both isolated from other colleagues. "Do you also think this meeting was a waste of time?" I asked, trying to start a conversation. She smiled, a sincere smile that lit up her face. "Yes, completely. It seems that Mr. Thompson just wants to hear his own voice." It was the beginning of a conversation that lasted for hours. We discovered we had a lot more in common than just our accents. We had dreams, ambitions and, above all, an intense desire to prove ourselves despite the odds. "Every time he makes a comment about my accent, I feel like hitting back," I confessed, as we drank coffee in a small cafe outside the office. "I know how it is. They think that because we have different accents, we are less capable. But we know that's not true," Maria replied, with a firmness that inspired me. Over time, our conversations became more frequent and deeper. We shared our frustrations, but also our dreams and hopes. We started meeting up outside of work, exploring the city together, going to museums, parks, and restaurants. On one of these outings, as we were walking through the park, Maria suddenly stopped and looked at me. "Jake, have you ever thought about leaving this company? About looking for something better?" I sighed, thinking about all the sleepless nights and the effort we had put into our jobs. "I've already thought about it, Maria. But I think if we leave, we'll be letting them win. We need to show that we're stronger than that." She nodded, holding my hand. "Then let's fight together, Jake. We're not alone in this." It was at that moment that I realized that my feeling for Maria had transformed into something deeper. She wasn't just a coworker or a friend. She was my partner, my confidant, and, above all, the person who gave me the strength to continue. In the months that followed, our relationship grew stronger. Maria supported me unconditionally as my team and I investigated Mr. Thompson's frauds. She was my rock, always there to encourage me when things got tough. "Jake, you're going to make it. I believe in you," she would say, whenever I doubted myself. And I believed her. Together, we formed an unbeatable duo, finding strength in our union to face any challenge that came our way. Our relationship was not only a relief from the oppressive work environment, but also a constant reminder that there was something worth fighting for. It was Maria who gave me the courage to face Mr. Thompson and expose his frauds. And when that fateful meeting finally arrived, she was there, in the front row, giving me strength with her confident gaze. After the meeting, when everything was finally over and Mr. Thompson was being let out, we met in the parking lot. She ran towards me and hugged me tightly. "You did it, Jake." "We did it," she said, tears in her eyes. I hugged her back, feeling a mixture of relief and joy. "I couldn't have done it without you, Maria. You were my strength." At that moment, I knew that no matter what the future held, we would face it together. Our relationship, forged through hardship and strengthened by solidarity, was the foundation on which we would build not only our careers, but our lives. With all the information in hand, the pressure on the shoulders of our small clandestine team was palpable. We knew that the presentation we were preparing could change not only our lives, but also the company culture. Every detail needed to be meticulously planned to ensure the impact was devastating and that Mr. Thompson finally faced the consequences of his actions. "Jake, we have to make sure every slide is perfect," said Samantha, as she adjusted the graphics in PowerPoint. "We can't give him room to contest anything." "I agree, Sam. Every piece of data, every piece of documentary evidence needs to be very clear and organized." "We can't leave room for doubt," I replied. Ethan, who was focused on analyzing the data, looked up and added, "I think we should start the presentation by highlighting the technical errors." This will keep everyone's attention focused on the real problems before we reveal the fraud. We need to prepare the ground. Maria, who was standing next to me, held my hand and looked straight into my eyes, saying, "Jake, you are the right person to do this. You have the confidence and courage to do it. We are all with you." Feeling Maria's support gave me the strength I needed to continue. "Thanks, guys. Let's do this right. Let's show the truth." We spent nights and weekends working on the presentation. Every chart, every table, every document was checked and revised multiple times. Ethan made sure the data was accurate and undisputed. Samantha ensured the presentation was visually impactful and easy to understand. Maria helped me rehearse my speech, correcting every detail, every intonation, so that I was confident and prepared. One such night, while we were all exhausted but determined, Maria suggested, "Jake, maybe we should include a final slide with a strong message about ethics and values. Something that resonates with everyone in the company." "Good idea, Maria. Something that shows that we are fighting for a better work environment for everyone," I replied. And so we did. The final slide contained a powerful quote about integrity and responsibility, accompanied by a symbolic image of the scales of justice. We wanted everyone in the room to feel the importance of what we were about to reveal. The night before the meeting, we received a surprise visitor. Mrs. Williams, my secret mentor, appeared in our makeshift conference room. "Jake, I know you're ready for this. Remember to stay calm and speak with conviction. They need to see that you're telling the truth," she said, placing a comforting hand on my shoulder. "Thank you, Mrs. Williams. I don't know what I would do without your advice and support," I replied, feeling a mix of nervousness and gratitude. She smiled and added, "Remember, Jake, this isn't just about you. It's about everyone who was harmed by Mr. Thompson. You're giving them all a voice." When she left, I looked at my team and felt a surge of determination. Tomorrow, we change everything. On the day of the meeting, the tension was palpable. Dressed in my best suit, I entered the conference room with Maria at my side. Samantha and Ethan were already there, adjusting the last details of the presentation. Mr. Thompson entered soon after, with his usual air of arrogance. He had no idea what was coming. "Okay, guys, let's get started," he said, with a dismissive tone. I took a deep breath, looked at my team and began the presentation. Initially, I focused on the technical errors, detailing each one precisely. The room was silent, all eyes were on me. As it progressed, I could see Mr. Thompson begin to shift uncomfortably in his chair. "So, the time has come to reveal the frauds. In addition to technical errors, we found evidence of financial manipulation and embezzlement of funds," he said, projecting the incriminating documents on the screen. The reaction was immediate. Murmurs began to echo around the room, and Mr. Thompson became visibly nervous. I continued, unmasking each fraud with clarity and conviction. When I finished, I looked around the room and said, "This isn't just about one man. It's about the integrity of our company and the work environment we want to build." The room erupted in applause. I knew we had done the right thing. And in that moment, I realized that, regardless of the consequences, we had taken an important step towards justice and change. On the day of the project meeting, I felt the weight of the world on my shoulders. The tension was palpable, and the air seemed thick with a mix of anxiety and anticipation. I was about to reveal not only technical errors, but also fraud and financial manipulations committed by Mr. Thompson. I looked around the room, seeing familiar faces of colleagues who, like me, were tired of Thompson's tyranny. However, what caught my attention the most was Mr. Thompson himself, who entered the room with his usual arrogance, without suspecting what was coming. "Jake, are you ready to start?" asked Mr. Thompson with a dismissive tone, as if he already expected me to fail. "Yes, sir. I'm ready," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady and controlled. I started the presentation by addressing the technical aspects of the projects. I showed detailed graphs, accurate data, and in-depth analysis. I managed to catch the attention of my colleagues and superiors, who were visibly impressed with the quality of the work. Mr. Thompson, however, looked bored, probably thinking this was just another routine performance. As you can see, these are the technical errors in recent projects, I said, pointing to a graph showing the flaws. But that's not all. There is something much more serious that needs to be addressed. At that moment, I felt the entire room hold its breath. It was now or never. I took a deep breath and continued. During our review, we discovered significant fraud that has been financially harming the company, I announced, observing the reaction of those present. Mr. Thompson became visibly nervous, his superior expression began to fade. "What are you talking about, Turner?" he interrupted, trying to maintain control of the situation. "I have proof that you embezzled funds and manipulated financial reports to hide your failures," I replied, keeping my gaze fixed on him. "And I'm not alone in this. My team and I have worked hard to gather all the evidence." The room was completely silent. I continued the presentation, showing documents, emails, and reports that prove the fraud. Each slide felt like a direct blow to Mr. Thompson, who was now sweating and visibly uncomfortable. "This is absurd," he shouted, standing up suddenly. "These accusations are unfounded." "Unfounded?" I replied, remaining calm. "So why don't we explain this based on these documents?" he said, pointing to the screen showing an exchange of compromising emails between Thompson and a supplier. Members of senior management began whispering among themselves, clearly shocked by the revelations. Mr. Thompson tried to argue, but his words sounded hollow. The truth was there, undeniable and devastating. "Ladies and gentlemen, I believe the evidence speaks for itself," I concluded. "The company deserves leadership that is honest and competent, something Mr. Thompson clearly is not." After I spoke, one of the directors, Mr. Collins, stood up. "Jake, we appreciate your courage and dedication. We need to address this immediately. An internal audit will begin immediately." Mr. Thompson tried to protest but was interrupted by Mr. Collins. "Please, Mr. Thompson, accompany us to the office. We need to discuss this in private." As Thompson was escorted out of the room, a heavy silence took over. I felt a deep relief, but also a recognition of what was to come. My colleagues began to applaud, a gesture of solidarity and respect that made me realize that all the effort had been worth it. Ethan, Samantha, Maria, and the other team members approached me. "You did an amazing job, Jake," Ethan said, with a proud smile. "Yes, you showed everyone what we are capable of when we work together," Samantha added. Maria, always by my side, held my hand and whispered, "I'm so proud of you." At that moment, I realized that change was just beginning, not just for me, but for the entire company. The battle had been tough, but the victory was ours, and with it, the hope of a new beginning. As soon as I finished my presentation, the silence in the meeting room was deafening. I felt a mix of relief and tension as I watched the shocked expressions of the senior management members. Mr. Thompson, on the other hand, was pale, sweating profusely, and visibly nervous. He shuffled through the papers in front of him, trying to find some way to defend himself, but he knew the evidence was irrefutable. The company's president, Mr. Richards, was the first to break the silence. "Jake, these are very serious accusations. Are you sure all this information is accurate and verifiable?" I stood up firmly and responded. "Yes, sir. All data presented has been verified and we have documentary evidence for each of the allegations. If necessary, I can provide further details and evidence." Mr. Thompson, trying to compose himself, interrupted. "This is absurd. These accusations are baseless and based on assumptions. Jake, you are trying to tarnish my reputation with lies." Before I could respond, Ethan stood up and spoke with determination. "Sir, I also participated in the investigation and can confirm the veracity of the information presented. This is not just Jake." Several colleagues contributed to this discovery. Samantha, who was next to me, also intervened. "We're not talking about assumptions, Mr. Thompson. We're talking about facts. And those facts clearly show that you embezzled funds and manipulated financial reports." The atmosphere was tense. Mr. Richards looked at Mr. Thompson, and then at us. Given what has been presented, I think the best course of action would be to initiate an immediate internal audit. We need an independent investigation to confirm these allegations. Mr. Thompson tried to argue once more, but his voice was shaky. This is a scam. They're trying to take me down. Maria, who was sitting at the back of the room, finally spoke up. Sir, this is not about trying to take someone down. This is about justice. We need a work environment where ethics and integrity are valued. The president gestured for everyone to calm down. Very well. Let us proceed with the audit. Jake, will you and your team be available to provide any information that is needed during this process? Yes, sir, I replied, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. I knew the battle was far from over, but this was a crucial step. After the meeting, I was surrounded by several colleagues who congratulated me on my courage. Ethan patted me on the back. You were amazing, Jake. I'm sure the truth will prevail. Samantha smiled. Finally, someone has the courage to stand up to Mr. Thompson. This will change everything. Maria came over and gave me a tight hug. I'm so proud of you. I know how hard this was, but you did what was right. In the days that followed, the internal audit was started urgently. With each new meeting, it became clearer that all our allegations were correct. Mr. Thompson was temporarily placed on leave while investigations continued, and the atmosphere at the company began to change. People started talking more openly about their experiences and supporting each other. A week later, Mr. Richards called me into his office. Jake, I just wanted to say that we are impressed with your integrity and courage. You have shown the kind of leadership we need here. The audit is almost complete, but we can already see that your allegations were true. Mr. Thompson will be fired and face the legal consequences. I felt a wave of relief and satisfaction. Thank you, sir. I didn't do this alone. My team was instrumental in making this all possible. Mr. Richards smiled. Yes, which is why we are considering promoting you to a leadership position. We need people like you to help guide the company in a more ethical and inclusive direction. I left the office with the feeling that, despite all the difficulties, the effort had been worth it. I had earned the respect of my colleagues and, more importantly, helped create a more fair and respectful work environment. From that moment on, I knew things would never be the same. As if it were yesterday, I remember the feeling of relief mixed with a touch of nervousness when internal audit confirmed all my allegations. Mr. Thompson was fired, and the company moved into a new era of transparency and respect. It was the beginning of a profound transformation that I could not have imagined. Shortly after Mr. Thompson's dismissal, senior management organized an all-employee meeting. The atmosphere was tense, but there was also a feeling of hope in the air. The CEO, Mr. Johnson, took the floor. We all know what happened recently. Mr. Thompson's actions do not reflect the values of this company. Starting today, we will initiate a series of changes to ensure this never happens again. And to lead this transformation, I am happy to announce that Jake Turner will be promoted to a leadership position. I was surprised and moved by the news. I looked at Ethan, Samantha and Maria, who were in the room, and saw smiles of approval. It was a new beginning for all of us. However, I knew the responsibility would be enormous. Over the next few days, I began working on a detailed plan to implement inclusion and diversity policies. I wanted all employees to feel valued and respected, regardless of their backgrounds or accents. I organized a series of meetings with different departments to understand their concerns and suggestions. During one of these meetings, Samantha raised her hand. Jake, I truly believe we need an active diversity committee. Something that goes beyond words and really makes a difference. I agree, Samantha. Let's form this committee and ensure that it has representation from all sectors of the company, I replied. I also implemented mandatory training on harassment, diversity, and inclusion. I wanted everyone to understand the importance of a respectful and collaborative work environment. During one of these trainings, a colleague named Marcos stood up and shared his experience. I was always afraid to talk about my ideas because of my northeastern accent. But now, I feel like I can be myself. Thanks for that, Jake. Those words touched me deeply. I realized that we were on the right path, and that gave me even more strength to continue. In addition to training, I introduced recruitment policies that guaranteed diversity. I wanted our team to reflect the plurality of society. I also established an anonymous channel for reporting harassment and discrimination, ensuring everyone had a safe place to express themselves. The transformation was not easy. There was resistance from some, especially those who were used to the company's old culture. But over time, these individuals began to see the benefits of a more inclusive and respectful work environment. One day, while I was in my new office, Ethan walked in with a smile on his face. "Jake, you need to see this. The annual employee satisfaction report just came out, and the results are incredible." I picked up the report and started reading. Employee satisfaction had increased dramatically, and many mentioned that they felt more valued and respected. It was a proud moment for me and the entire team. At the end of the year, we organized an event to celebrate the achievements. During the event, Maria approached me, holding a glass of champagne. "Jake, you made this happen. I'm so proud of you." "I didn't do this alone, Maria. We all worked together to create this change. And we still have a lot to do," I replied, holding her hand. The company had changed for the better, and I knew we were just getting started. The journey was long and challenging, but every moment of difficulty was worth it. Now, I look to the future with hope and determination, knowing that together we could face any challenge and create a work environment where everyone felt truly valued. The promotion and the company's new culture brought an air of renewal that I had never felt before. We were all celebrating our collective victory over years of toxic management and the positive change we were building together. It was then that, amidst the euphoria, I received an unexpected visitor. Mrs. Williams, my secret mentor and former department chair, appeared in my office. She had a serious expression, but she also looked satisfied, as if a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. "Jake, I need to talk to you," she said, closing the door behind her. "Of course, Mrs. Williams. Come in, please," I replied, curious and a little apprehensive. She sat in the chair across from my desk and was silent for a moment, as if she was carefully choosing her words. "I want to thank you for everything you've done. You not only saved the company from further losses, but you also helped create a better environment for all of us," she began, looking straight into my eyes. "I just did what I thought was right. And with your help, of course," I replied, trying to hide my nervousness. I knew there was more to that visit. Mrs. Williams took a deep breath and continued, "Jake, there's something you need to know. I've known about Mr. Thompson's frauds for years. I've always known he was involved in illicit activities, but I've never been able to gather the evidence needed to unmask him." I was shocked. "You knew? But why didn't you ever say anything?" She sighed and looked down. "I tried, Jake. But he always managed to get away with it, manipulating reports and using his influence to discredit me. When I retired, I thought I would never see justice done. That's when you showed up." I was speechless. Mrs. Williams had been an incredible mentor, but I never imagined she had been fighting this battle for so long. "So why did you help me?" I asked, still trying to understand the situation. She looked up and replied firmly, "Because I saw in you the courage and determination I needed. I knew you could do what I couldn't. And, yes, it was also a form of revenge. Mr. Thompson ruined my career, and I wanted to see him pay for it." There was a moment of silence between us. I processed everything I had just heard. Mrs. Williams had played her cards strategically, using me as a crucial piece in her plan. And yet, I felt like I had done the right thing. "I don't know what to say," I mumbled, finally finding my voice. "No need to say anything," she replied softly. "I just want you to know that sometimes justice needs secret allies. And you were the best ally I could have found." We got up, and she held out her hand. "Congratulations on your promotion, Jake. You deserve it." I shook his hand firmly. "Thank you, Mrs. Williams. And thank you for believing in me." She smiled, a genuine smile I hadn't seen in a long time. "Take good care of the company. And always remember to fight for what's fair." As I watched her leave the room, a sense of accomplishment washed over me. I had been a cog in a bigger game, yes, but I had also been an agent of change. Justice had prevailed, and the company was now moving towards a fairer and more inclusive future. With this new perspective, I felt more motivated than ever to continue working hard, not only to maintain the new company culture, but to ensure that no one else had to go through what I and so many others went through. And deep down, I knew I had a secret ally, always willing to support the cause of justice.